So I know this is not the most flattering angle, but I'm driving, and this is how busy I am this week, is that I need to record while driving. So you're going to get some scattered thoughts today. And this is sort of going to be like a primer on something I intend to do a bigger video on as I get a chance to dig into it a bit more. And that is the Messianic vision of Isaiah, which is not just a vision of the Messiah to come, but a vision of the Trinity and of the proclamation of the gospel of the Son. This is something that pops up in various spots throughout the Old Testament, is referenced again multiple times in the New Testament as the completion and fulfillment of these things. All right, blessed are the feet of those who bring the good news, things like this. And Isaiah hits all of those in one book. Isaiah has to be one of the densest, deepest, richest books in the New Testament, or in the Old Testament, as far as theology and messianic vision goes, and looking towards the eschaton, looking towards not only the end times as we often think of it, but the end times which include the Messianic age. This is a very important thing people often miss when they're reading through the Old Testament, is when it talks about the time to come, the end days, the last age, things like this. Often it's not necessarily talking about the final judgment, though that does come up often. It's talking about the age of the Messiah, where the Messiah has been sent, he has done his work, and now his gospel is being proclaimed. And we see this scattered throughout Isaiah. Right? Not only is Isaiah 7 talking about the virgin birth, and it is virgin birth. Those who want to argue about the word on maiden there, the Hebrew word, it is used, as far as I'm aware, very rarely in the Old Testament. There is a word for virgin that's not maiden. This is true. But the word used there of maiden is used of figures like Moses' sister when it's describing her as in the beginning of the Exodus, not later. So she is, as a young girl, is described as this type of maiden. So the imagery of the use of maiden here and the way this specific word's used throughout the Old Testament is that of someone who's young, unmarried, and presumably a virgin. That's why it's also used to describe a virgin throughout various parts of the Old Testament. And this is why the Septuagint authors translated it as virgin. Anyone who says this is a Christian misinterpretation, well, it was translated virgin long before Jesus' own day. So it can't have just been a Christian misinterpretation. And if someone wants to debate with those who were studying the Hebrew text as part of their livelihood and got many parts of translating the Old Testament right, even when we think we maybe favor the Hebrew text over the Greek text with Septuagint, oftentimes there's points to be drawn from how they are interpreting it when they translate it into the Greek, and things that give us insights we don't have otherwise. These are people who knew what they were doing. So when they translated Isaiah 7:14 in the Greek as virgin, they knew what they were talking about. They were looking at this imagery and the way this word was used and said, that is what is going on here. On top of, that's a miraculous birth. This isn't just some woman, right? If a woman gives birth, that's not a miraculous birth, you know? There are times where, like, Ruth's womb in Ruth 4 is described as being open so she can bear children, things like this. But we have examples of more miraculous births, right? Someone who is barren and old. Someone who is just barren and their womb has been closed, unable to be opened for years. And then suddenly their womb is now open. This wouldn't, if it was just a woman giving birth, that wouldn't be a spectacular thing. But a virgin giving birth, this would fit with how the Messianic vision works throughout the Old Testament. It's constantly this lesser to the greater imagery, where we move from this event in the past, even if it was great and monumentous, it is lesser than what is to come later. The Exodus was a great and monumentous event, but there is a greater Exodus to come. The giving of the law was great, but it is not the same as the circumcision of the heart, which is to come. These types of images pop up again and again throughout the Old Testament into the New Testament. So when you look at Isaiah 7, it is really strange when you take into account all the actual biblical data and the words being used, and trying to then argue it's anything short of a miraculous virgin birth. I think that case is pretty clear. But you also have other parts of Isaiah, right? Isaiah 9 and 11, which I've talked about recently with Javier Perdomo on his channel. Go check out his recent live stream I did with him. You can see it in my YouTube post as well. I've put a few links to it, kind of promoting it, pushing people towards that. Go check out that video. But I talk about Isaiah 11, and then going back to verse 9, it talks about the Messiah. In Isaiah 11, this Messiah, the stump, the root of Jesse, the branch that grows. Just a little bit before that in Isaiah 9, the child that is promised is described as El Gibor, the mighty God. Not his name means the mighty God, not his name means X. He has the name mighty God. And throughout the Old Testament, this name imagery matters, especially when it comes to Yahweh's name. Only Yahweh can have the divine name. This is something I have actually made a video on, so go look up my video, The Name of the Lord, and you'll see my case there. But this Messianic figure is told to be coming out of this virgin birth. He is called God. He is from the line of David, right? This is all building up, and Jesus fulfills all this. What gets even more interesting is that Isaiah just gets more explicit as the book goes on, if Isaiah 9 wasn't explicit enough, on the divinity of this coming Messiah, that this figure to come, this one who is going to bring salvation, this one who's going to do the acts the Lord himself has been said to be coming to do, and the other prophets continue to tell us the Lord himself is coming to do these things. And even hearkening back to older prophecies like Numbers 24 and Genesis 49, he says God is coming to do these things, and that God is going to be in the flesh, in the Messiah, in the line of David. It is going to be this child born of a virgin. So he doesn't sort of say this on accident. He doesn't tone this down. He just keeps ramping it up, even to the point that there are parts of Isaiah where it seems to be talking about God, and then it seems to be talking about David, aka the Messiah, interchangeably, where he applies the same thing that he just applied to the Lord, and then applies it to David, talking about the coming Messiah, and then applies it back to the Lord. This is sort of like Hebrew parallelism, where he's tying these things together. He's saying these things that God is doing are the exact things this Messiah is doing. And not as someone separate from God, not as an agent doing God's will, as one by his own prerogative and by his own right, sharing in the glory of the Lord, which Isaiah himself says, and others say, only the Lord can have the Lord's glory. No one else can have it. Here in the imagery of Isaiah, we see multiple subjects having that glory. And that is one of the reasons so many Old Testament Jews, especially as they're writing out, right, we have the prophets' writings, knew about the plurality of the Godhead in the Old Testament, including around the Messianic vision. We see that in Second Temple literature, and we see that from figures even in Jesus' own day like Philo, who speak of the Logos as the divine Son of God and as coming to do these great things. This isn't unique to Christianity. Christianity is just the continuation of these ideas and this great Messianic vision, not just from Isaiah, but really from all over the Old Testament. All the way back to Genesis 3. Really, all the prophecies of the Old Testament can be said to be an expanding on the promise of Genesis 3:15, which is, between the woman and the serpent there will be enmity. Between her seed and his seed there will be enmity. And then her seed, he, it moves from the plural to the singular, he will crush the serpent's head, but yet his heel will be wounded. So this promised seed, distinct from the rest of the woman's descendants, is going to be the one to crush the serpent's head, but take a wound while doing it. We've covered this at length in our Messianic series. If this video itself sounds interesting to you, go back and watch this. If any of this Trinitarian language sounds interesting to you, watch my Defending the Trinity playlist. Watch these things, right? Jesus as Messiah is the other playlist, Defending the Trinity. These are things that go hand in hand. These are connected images throughout the Old Testament for a reason. The Messianic vision is not just the promise of the Messiah to come. It's not just the promise of what he will do and what will happen to him. It's the promise of God's redemptive act in human history. This is one of the most beautiful and powerful things about that promise in the Old Testament, given through that first promise to Eve, and then continued on and expanded as we hear more and more about this Messiah and the Lord's coming redemption, is that the Lord himself is going to do this saving. That the Lord himself is going to be the ransom and redemption of Israel. He will be the one who wipes the tears from our eyes. He will be the one who comes himself and does the saving work no one else can do, which is why we can be so sure it's true. When God makes a promise, it is guaranteed. So when we have these promises in the Old Testament, when we have the promises of the Psalter, the promises of Isaiah, they are sure, they are finished. That's why Isaiah often talks about things to come in the past tense. When he speaks of a promise of something God's going to do, the reason he talks about it in the past tense is because it's as sure as finished already. It's called the perfect tense in Hebrew. It's this way of speaking of something that is sure to happen. So sure, you can talk about it as if it's already done or being done. Sometimes it's even in the present tense. And when we translate it into English anyway. This is something we can't forget. And if you are a Christian watching this, that's one of the things that should give us the most hope. That we see those promises in the Old Testament of the coming suffering, death, and resurrection of the Messiah, of Jesus. And then in the New Testament, we see that play out and then are promised again, just as the Messiah has gone through these things. And you can see what he's gone through. You can know what he's gone through. He is the example of how to live through these things. Now you can be sure as you go through these things, the promises given to him still apply to you. That promise of redemption, that promise of life, that promise of perseverance, that promise that suffering will bring glory in the kingdom of Christ. That is a promise extended to us as believers, as those connected to and abiding in the true vine. We have those as sure promises. And one of the greatest signs of that is not only, right, the resurrection, the historical event of the resurrection, that we can be sure is true. That is our greatest hope. Another sign that this is what has come to pass, we see it in the book of Acts. Immediately after the gospel's finished, we see in the book of Acts, not just the ministry of Jesus is finished, but it is earthly ministry specifically. His greater ministry now continues. He's now our advocate. He's now the one interceding with us, just like the angel of the Lord and did for Joshua in Zechariah 3. He sent his advocate, his comforter, the Holy Spirit, who now abides in us, and the ministry of the kingdom on earth, that gospel proclamation foretold by Isaiah and others, is the promise that the Messianic age is in full force. And those other sure promises are still to come, and you can be certain of it, because there are those who are the feet on the mountain, who are joyous in carrying the good news. We see that with Peter, with Paul, with all the apostles, with those suffering and dying for the kingdom. There's a reason when Peter is taken before the council and punished, as well as the others, that when he goes back to the body of Christ and tells them what happens, they start to glory and give praise to God and say, this is a great thing. And look at Psalm 2 and say, that was the prediction of what happened to the Lord, these people rebelling, and now they rebel in futility because the kingdom is here and the Messianic age is here and the gospel is being proclaimed. So all this suffering we know is part of all this work and will be all the more to our benefit in the future. These are things we can be sure on, we can rest in, we can go to. So a lot of those may not end up in the longer Isaiah video that will be coming, or maybe series of Isaiah videos, we'll see. But it is sure to be part of different aspects of it. Be on the lookout for that. And if there's something in this video that I've talked about in my ramblings that sounds like something you want to hear more about, whether or not it's related to the Messianic or Trinitarian vision of Isaiah, just put it in the comments and let me know. And I might still make time to make a video on that specific subject. Or we'll push certain things to the top of the queue. You know, I make videos for whoever watches these, and if the people watching these want something specific in relation to what I'm already talking about, I'm happy to accommodate that. So just let me know. And like I said, I'll put them in the post credits as the video ends. I'll put the playlist for Jesus as Messiah, and then the live stream for Javier Perdomo, if you haven't seen it. Those will both be linked there at the end. So go and check those out. You guys have a wonderful day. God bless.